Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Skillshare webinar series hosted by the National Center for Pavement Preservation, Midwest Pavement Preservation Partnership. My name is Rob Green, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's program. I'm with the Michigan Department of Transportation and the current chair of the Midwest Pavement Preservation Partnership. Before we get started, we would just so to help us out to understand our audience, we're going to throw up a quick poll that's just asking where everybody's from. So if you could take a quick second to respond to that. I see that we still have some folks that are just joining us. There is a quick poll just to help us understand who's all on the line. If you wouldn't mind taking a quick moment to respond to that, and then we will get underway. We'll do another 10 seconds or so. And all right, thank you. If you're joining us for the first time and you're not familiar with the National Center, I encourage you to head over to the website and check it out. We're currently working on updating the website, but there is still a wealth of knowledge that can be found out there. A lot of great resources that we're updating, such as preservation specifications from all the state DOTs and Canadian provinces, and a database for fix types and costs, which is a great resource if you're interested in trying out a new fix. You can generate a rough estimate based on what others are seeing as costs. Before we get started with today's program, I wanted to take a moment and explain how our webinars may be different from others. Our format is an open panel discussion. Each member of the panel will give a short 5 to 10 minute presentation, and then we'll open the floor up to all of you. Please, I encourage all of you to enter your questions into the question panel that you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will, when we come to that part of the conversation of the presentation where it's the panel discussion, we will then, as the moderator, I'll start asking the questions to the panel members. If there's a specific member that you would like the question to go to, please indicate that, and we'll do all the questions at the end. But if you hear if there's something that pops into your mind, please go ahead and put that question in, and we will get to it when that time comes. I strongly believe that we all learn better in these open conversations. So again, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that. Without any further delay, let's get started. Today's topic is utilizing a spray paver in your pavement preservation program. Our panel members today are Marvin Exline from Asphalt Materials, Mike Longshaw from the Kansas Department of Transportation, Nathan Allward from Indiana DOT, and Mitch Husky from Missouri DOT. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Marvin.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Marvin Exline. I'm with the technical group for Asphalt Materials. And some of my previous companies I've worked for, I dealt a lot with ultra-thin bonded wearing course and going through spray pavers, and also with some of the demonstrated hot mix going through spray pavers. So with that, I've got a few slides put together to just give you a brief background on spray pavers. So the first question I thought that would be of interest to everybody is, why do spray pavers exist in the first place? And if you take a look at the traditional paving process using distributors for application of the tack coats, it really limits the rate of tack that you can use because you're driving everything over the tack coat that's in the construction process. And it also limits somewhat your tack selection. And it tends to favor harder based asphalt materials to reduce tracking issues. And it definitely does not favor polymer modified emulsions because of pickup and that type of thing. The spray pavers, by contrast, are allowing these higher application rates of the tack. They will allow polymer modified emulsions They're non-tracking due to the process, and they provide very good bonding for thin lifts of HMA or ultra-thin bonded wearing cores. So a little description here as far as what is a spray paver. And what you're looking at is basically a combination of a distributor and a paver in one machine. And the equipment is able to spray the polymer modified emulsion immediately ahead of where the hot mix is being placed. And the diagrams down below, you can see where the spray application is coming out, and within a few feet, or not few feet, almost few inches to a foot, you're seeing the hot mix being placed on top of it. The spray paver capabilities, like with ultra thin bonded wearing cores, which is typically less than an inch, you can typically pave 3 to 4 lane miles per day, and in city and residential, 200 to 400 ton per day. When you go to dense graded hot mix with thicker lifts, typically 1.5 inches plus, you can usually pave 2 to 3 miles per day and place 600 or 400 to 600 tons per day in the city and residential applications. As far as capacities, I just show 2 of the different spray pavers. I believe there's at least another one in the marketplace now, but these are the ones that I had info on the best. One is a Road Tech, and typically with a screed that can do 10 foot to 20 foot. It has an emulsion tank on board capable of holding about 2,100 gallons, and it requires the use of a material transfer device to feed the paver. The Vogely is a spray jet paver. Then you can have a screed that's 8 to 16 foot or 10 to 20 foot. It has an insert that goes into the paver hopper that will increase the capacity of the emulsion storage to 1,800 gallons. And it also has a 500 gallon on deck tank that, when you can take the insert out, will allow you to use trucks to load directly to the hopper and not have to use a material transfer device. Anytime you put the device, the extra tank in the hopper, material transfer device is the only way to feed it. As far as the spray paver material features, typically it's polymer modified emulsions going into the process. And those emulsions will typically have a spec maybe requiring 65% asphalt content, and the application rate can be typically 1,500 to 0.2 of a gallon per square yard. This is at least twice what normal tack rates are, and in some cases, like if you're using a dilute SS1H for your tack, this could be 4 times the amount of tack that you're normally placing in normal construction. The other thing about this, as you can see in the picture on the right, where the emulsion is being applied and the hot mix immediately behind it, there is absolutely no cure time before placement of the hot mix on the emulsion. Another quick comment here too is the types of emulsion. You know, my original thoughts on this is when you're placing hot mix on top of an emulsion, it's going to drive off all the water, and you can use any formulation and type of emulsion that you want. And it turned out that, you know, you're driving off a high percentage of the moisture, but not necessarily all of it immediately. So it will, if you use like a slow setting or a medium setting type of emulsion formulation, you could get leaching if you got caught in a heavy rainfall or near an urban area that has a sprinkler that comes on at 2 a.m. when you're doing your night paving. So, and trust me, we're speaking from experience on that one. Also, the emulsions that go through these spray pavers, they have to be low viscosity just because of the systems on the paver itself. And typically they need to be very low sieve emulsions. And if you think about the nozzles on your typical distributor and how big they are, the nozzles on a spray paver are more like what you would see on a garden sprayer, because you're traveling at such a slow rate of speed compared to what a distributor is. So it makes the nozzle size very small, and that's the need for the low sieve content. So then that brings up the questions, you know, I'm using 2 to 4 times more tack coat. Why am I using so much tack coat, and why am I using a polymer modified tack coat? And the response back to that is, you know, the thin lift is really where you have to get a very good bond to prevent delamination. So the higher tack rate can definitely help in that regard. We've also found over a period of time and monitoring projects, that type of thing, the higher tack rate can actually enhance the performance of the hot mix itself, because you're adding so much additional binder to it, and it's at the interface, but it appears to give you a benefit in both rutting and cracking. And then the polymer modified emulsion, especially when you're doing thin lift and the ultra thin bonded type of process, polymer modified helps resist over migration of the tack. So that was one of the primary drivers back at the ultra thin bonded wearing course introduction, is you didn't want to have the emulsion flushing to the surface. But then there's other benefits that the polymer modified materials brings to the overall system. And again, it will give you better properties as far as your end product HMA. As far as application features, when you're looking at thin lift, you have a fairly high rate of travel speed, 60 to 100 feet per minute, which is considerably faster than traditional paving. As you go to dense graded and placing thicker lifts, it slows the process down, but still relatively quick. It does give you a uniform application of tack, and there's never any construction traffic on the tack. And that brings us to the kind of pros and cons of spray pavers. And then on the pro side, there's never any tracking of tack. And it is a delivery system basically for higher rates of tack, and allowing polymer modified tack, allowing the better bonding properties you get from the higher amount of tack and the better tack. And then another benefit can be there's no curing time needed for the tack, because you're paving over it, you know, as it's almost being placed. So in urban situations where you don't want to have tack down a city street or something like that and having cross traffic or pedestrian traffic, it's a benefit there. Night paving, it's a benefit, because if I'm using an emulsion tack in a normal paving operation, I'm typically trying to let it cure. So it's adding time before I can actually be placing mix on the pavement. So those are the benefit side. On the con side, the equipment is expensive, and there is a limited number of spray pavers, but there are various companies that will travel and basically subcontract to your local contractors for using a spray paver. Material transfer devices are required for the Road Tech, and they will also be required for the Vogely if you're using the insert that has a higher capacity. The other thing, when you have your MTD and your paver, which is of pretty good size, it limits kind of the maneuverability of it. So it's not something that's that great in a subdivision, and it's not something you necessarily want to try to do in a cul-de-sac and that type of thing. And it does require what I'm calling here a special emulsion, you know, that is a little bit different than your typical emulsion, but you're using emulsions that are similar to what you would see on a polymer modified chip seal, only they're lower viscosity and lower sieve. So this is just one of the delivery systems, and helps address some of the things as far as tracking and pickup. And there are, you know, other potential, you know, alternatives that's been looked at, which is like the trackless systems, trackless emulsions, and then there's some various hot applied systems that also are being evaluated. And I think that concludes me, and I'll hand it back over.
Thank you very much, Marvin. And we will move right on to Mike, I believe, is our next one.
Can you see that, everybody?
Yes.
Go, Mike.
Pardon?
Good.
My name is Mike Longshire. I'm KDOT's Metro Engineer in Wichita. I'm going to talk about spray paving in Kansas. All right, so KDOT began using UBAS, or ultra thin bonded asphalt surface, in the early 2000s. This was placed with a spray paver and utilized, and still is used today as a common preventive maintenance action. It's a very thin process. It does a great job of sealing off the pavement, because it lays that emulsion that Marvin was talking about on the pavement, and then puts a gap graded mix on top of it. Does a great job of reducing overspray, does a great job reducing noise. The challenge is it doesn't provide much structural improvement. The emulsion content that you shoot on that through that spray paver on a UBAS is about 0.18 gallons per square yard, and that's real sensitive on this, because if you don't shoot enough, it doesn't stick very well. If you shoot too much, it comes through the surface, and nobody likes to see the tack come through the surface of your mix. So back when we started looking at doing spray pavers for dense graded mix, this was kind of a challenge you'd see a lot, where the contractor did a great job of spraying a good tack coat out there on the roadway, and then the trucks start driving across it, and you lose a lot of the tack that you're paying for to bond that pavement to the existing roadway. Like I said, you weren't getting the emulsion that you're paying for, so they thought, man, spray paver did a great job with UBAS. Let's try that with overlays. So back around 2010, they specified that contractor place a dense graded mix with the spray paver. They used the same Vogely spray paver that they're using for the UBAS product. They did different shot rates to set up to see what worked best for not only gluing to the roadway, or attached to the roadway, but also see if it could improve performance. And then they set a bunch of test sections to monitor that performance over time. I said KDOT has done a number of test sections throughout the state. They varied that emulsion shot rate from as low as a 0.08 gallons per square yard up to a 0.46 gallons per square yard. We found out that the EBL shot rate was not as sensitive as it was for the ultra thin bonded asphalt surface, that it never came to the top. We never had any rutting problems, even when they had that 0.46 shot rate. These guys are on the left, those are KDOT engineers and technicians that go out there and they walk these test sections every year, and they take write down or map out the longitudinal and transverse cracks that are on these sections, and then they look at it to see which is doing the best. So what they've discovered is that the 0.20 gallons per square yard did the best for especially eliminating the longitudinal cracks. And although as the shot rate went up, it did help with the transverse crack some, it didn't make enough difference to continue shooting that high shot rate. As then KDOT sets their test sections at 1,000 feet. And if you look here on the right, they actually mark on the pavement. So you look here where it shows a 0.228 gallons per square yard emulsion bonding liquid to the left, and the right is another shot rate. And they pretty much just change shot rates through the paver as they go, and mark those, and then come out and monitor every year. Here's actually when they go over ultra thin bonded asphalt surfaces, that has such a open grade on it that they have a higher shot rate they use for that. And they shoot a 0.3 gallons per square yard on that stuff, again with the idea that they can fill up a lot of those voids on the surface and kind of create a flexible membrane down in that UBAS to create to stop some of the cracking. If you look here on the picture down here, you see how thick that membrane is. This is actually that 0.46 shot rate that I talked about. This is actually on a mill surface, but you can see it looks pretty much like a thick seal before the hot mix gets it. This paver is going to the right, so you get the spray bar, sprays that high rate of EBL, and then the hot mix follows right on top of it and gets compacted in place. This is actually the bottom of the thing is kind of a note that I pulled out of a set of plans. If you look on the left-hand side where it's highlighted, this is covering a UBAS, and it's got that EBL at a 0.3 gallons per square yard. And if you just look right next to it, the SS1HP, which is the mix, or for the hot mix they're placing on the shoulder and other place in the job without a spray paver, only had a 0.05 gallons per square yard. So you see that like Marvin mentioned, that the shot rate can be so much higher with a spray paver. Kansas also uses spray paver every time they pave over concrete pavement. They found that concrete pavement has kind of a little scum to it, and if you spray your normal tack and drive over with trucks, it pretty much all of it goes away. So by using a spray paver, they can get that good bond they're looking for, and none of it gets hauled off with the trucks and construction equipment, because it's pretty much gets covered as soon as it gets laid on the pavement. The Kansas Turnpike uses spray paver for all their work, asphalt, concrete, whatever, everything they do, they use a spray paver because they were convinced that that is the way to go on their products. This is a couple specifications. I'm not going to read this all to you, but This is how we cover it in our specs. We tell the contractor that he's got to use a spray paver, and then we tell him what requirements are and that you can't have anything get in contact with the asphalt emulsion before the hot mix is applied. This is our normal spec for our EBL, which is our emulsion bonding liquid, which is our tack coat. Again, it's real close to a CRS 2P rapid set cationic mix. We set the residue rate at 63, and just like Marvin said, the key here is to make sure that stuff can go through the nozzles and get through the paver. That's all I got from Candace. I will turn it back.
Hey, thank you very much, Mike. Do appreciate it. We've got Nathan from Indiana on deck. Hoosier State, we're looking forward to learning from your experiences.
All right. Hopefully you guys can see that. I am Nathan Alwad, asphalt engineer with INDOT, Indiana DOT, and started in 2007 with the department and took this position in around 2015. So learned a little bit about asphalt here in the last few years, but learned a lot about spray pavers too. There's, as has been talked about, there's really two main applications we've used spray pavers for, and that's ultra thin bonded wearing course or dense graded HMA. We started, the best I could tell is we started with we call it UBWC here in Indiana. We started using it in about 2008. This is based on the data I could mine. That's kind of our history on the UBWC use. Kind of came to a head in 2013 and 14. Its use as of late has sort of waned off, but I think, you know, internally we're having talks with some of our pavement asset management groups as to maybe why that kind of fell out of our preservation program. Hopefully we can get those ramped up a little bit more where appropriate. I did want to show this is the recommended application rate in our spec. We typically use the 9.5 millimeter gradation for the UBWC, but as you can see, that's slightly more than double what we would typically use for a tack coat. And then we also have some minor adjustments depending on what asphalt or what surface you're actually paving on. So, and I just had two slides I wanted to show with some existing UBWC. This is a fairly busy road. This was UBWC paved in 2015. 46,000 AEDT, sort of low trucks, but it still has 8% trucks, and it still looks pretty good out there. This was a great application for it. The contract was let, the machines came out, everything was done at night, and it was all done within a couple of days. I think it was less than 2 weeks from start to finish, and the public was really happy with it. So the public just sees that it's a brand new roadway. They don't realize it's a completely different type of treatment. Here's another example of again a 4-lane divided highway, about 20,000 AEDT. This one was paved in 2019. Again, just showing what it looks like after a few years. So like I said, the other application we began using the spray paver with is dense graded HMA. We have been talking with industry for quite a few years. You know, we as a department had interest in using this. We knew some other states were doing this, and it really was a you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg type of thing. It was hard for us to specify a project when nobody had a spray paver, and nobody wanted to buy a spray paver because there was no projects. Here's a quick breakdown of our history. So in 2017 was the pilot projects, and I believe those were subcontracted out. You know, our main prime contractors had to subcontract that out because nobody owned the machine. But that got, you know, the process started, got everybody maybe a little bit more familiar with the technology. Everybody started asking the right questions. And so we progressively grew that over the years. And what I did want to point out is I don't exactly have added cost for what that spray paver adds to a contract, because there's not a specific spray paver item. It's hidden in some various pay items. But the guidance I've been giving designers is it adds about a 3% increase to the contract, just concerning the milling and resurfacing operations. So like I said, so 2018 was, we had a couple pilot projects in 2017. 2018 is when, you know, as we kind of guaranteed that more projects were coming, is when the first contractor actually bought a machine. They decided to go with the CAT retrofit option, which seems to be working out fairly well. So maybe surprisingly is not the right word, but by the end of 2022, 4 of our major contractors owned a spray paver. So as far as if you'll notice, I have there in 2023, I have you know, the plus signs, and then in 2024 and 25 I have question marks, because and the reason for that is up until now, it really took me or a colleague babysitting this initiative and manually inserting these specs into contracts. And what we did is we finally locked down a basis for use. So in Indiana, we are targeting our high value, high profile roadways to use the spray paver on, because there is added cost. And so what we're looking for is really our interstate type projects, HMA or SMA. They can be used for night work, like has been discussed, or concrete overlays. But what we did is we put that basis for use in our design manual, so that these projects start happening automatically, and I can get out of the babysitting job, which I am more than happy to get out of. So I'm not going to get too much in the weeds on the specs, but this is how we these RSPs I have listed here are how we insert those into the various contracts when needed. And you can Google those or search for them if you like. So again, this is our typical application rate with dense graded HMA. Looks very similar to the UBWC one I showed earlier, except we also added 19 millimeter and 25 millimeter. So we do use it for all lifts in the project, and again with some tweaks based on what you're paving on top of. And here's the the emulsion we use. It is the exact same emulsion we use for UBWC that we specify, and this looks really similar to, I think, what Kansas just showed. So there it is for those who are wondering. So I did want to briefly talk about issues or lessons learned when we started dense graded HMA and spray pavers. One of the first things is the first contracts, we just swapped out the tack coat item for the spray paver emulsion item. And what we didn't realize is that spray pavers cannot be used on every part of a contract. There's just areas where it can't fit in there. There's areas where you have to use a widener or other equipment. So it's important to separate conventional tack coat and spray paver emulsion in the contract and have both those pay items. And then what we, similar to that discussion, what we learned is we don't necessarily want to use the spray paver on, even though we're targeting a project, you might not want to use the spray paver on or in areas where it doesn't make sense. And one thing we learned is we don't really want to specify that spray paver on shoulders. Why use that premium product on shoulders? And again, I don't want to get into the weeds on specs or anything. I just wanted to show this is how we take care of it. That second paragraph is kind of the main crux, is mixture placed on all travel lanes, turn lanes, auxiliary lanes, and ramps, which are 11 feet or more in width. So that's where spray pavers are going to be used. So anybody bidding on the contract knows exactly which tonnage, which lane the spray paver is going to be used on, and the like. And then one other issue we learned along the way, in Indiana, we do plate samples behind the paver for testing. And initially, so you can't put the plates down ahead of the spray paver and just pave over them, because the emulsion is also going to be on those plates, which would affect the results. So what we initially had, the idea we came up with was we say, hey, there's going to be a plate sample in this area, let's say about 100-foot area, and hey, you contractor, come in, pre-tack this with conventional tack, just this area, and we'll put the plates down, and then you pave over it with the spray paver and turn the spray bar off. Well, that sounds good in practice, but in reality, it's a logistical nightmare as far as coordinating that. You're having the tack coat distributor sitting there not being used all day. One guy's either having to sit in that truck or having to get out and run to that truck and bring it back. It was a nightmare. And not to mention that by the time construction traffic, the MTV, the paver got to the plate sampling area, all that stuff was tracked and gone anyway. So I made a off the hip decision one day just to allow in the plate sampling area only, the spray bar can just be turned off, and tack coat is not required in the plate sampling area, which it's not the most popular idea, but that was the simplest way, the quickest way to get this initiative going with no complications. And that's kind of the one area we're still looking to improve is how can we make plate sampling and the spray paver work together for the best end product. So that's really all I had, and I guess I will turn it over, turn it back over. So.
Oh, we appreciate your insight there, Nathan. As it pertains to the contracts, I mean, that's something that here in Michigan we've experienced ourselves, to where I mean, a lot of this, especially the open graded aspect, was originally the old Nova chip, right? And when it first kind of came on board, there was a high use of it, then it kind of started taper off. and we're in the same boat as Indiana on looking for opportunities to bring this fix back into play, but same obstacles of lack of contractors. So yeah, we're still learning, trying to figure out the best way to move forward. All right, one last presentation before I see we've got a lot of good questions that are coming in, which is great. And we'll get to those here shortly. Our last presenter is going to be Mitch Husky from the Missouri DOT. Mitch, take it away, sir.
Okay. Hope everybody can see my screen. Yeah, I'm with the Missouri Department of Transportation. We've got quite a bit of experience with spray pavers. We started back when, like you mentioned, with NovaChip. We went to UBOS. We put together a little tweak the spec for our needs. What I have here up on the screen for y'all is our spray paver spec. Primarily, that's targeting dense graded mixes. So we've had a lot of success with UBOSs over the years. We've used them as a preventative maintenance treatment on a lot of our interstates to just prevent that full depth asphalt repairs that we'll eventually do. But we started with dense graded mixes back in 2007. We kind of experimented with it on one of our lettered routes, Highway T, with a contractor. We've been pretty blessed. We have a lot of contractors that do have spray pavers across the state, so we didn't really have any issues with trying to find somebody that would actually run a dense graded mix through a spray paver. But Highway T was our first kind of our experiment with dense graded mix. We placed our low type mixes, which is our BP1s, bit bases, non-super pave mixes through it. We did several test areas and we played around with the application rates from about 1.5 to all the way up to 0.28. We did have some success with that, and from there, then we started looking at some of our super pave mixes to do dense graded mixes on. In 2014, we did a thin lift spray paver project with 095, SB 095 CLP. That was an 1.5 inch overlay placed through a spray paver using CPIM emulsion. Great success. That pavement's still performing to this day. Very little cracking in it, and we did a lot of testing on it. We did do some different application rates with the emulsion. We did from 0.2 all the way to 0.3 on that, and we learned a lot from that project. We ended up not being able to take cores for about a week. So where we would normally take a density core, usually within 24 hours of placement, we ended up starting to have to wait 3 days, and then we bumped it up to a week. And then we could really start seeing the bonding that was going on with that emulsion. So we saw our values drop off as we increased the application rate. So we ended up settling on about 0.25. But yeah, that was a huge success, and so we currently still are doing dense graded mixes. Right now we have a Route A project in front of General Motors that we're currently placing with a spray paver, and that's a super pave mix on top of concrete, and job's going well, and it looks like we're getting a good bond. We had some of the same issues that everybody else has been saying, where we had tracking off and the bonding issues. So we've been able to negate that by using spray pavers. So I wish we could use more of them, but as you can see, our spec is kind of generic. So we allow contractors to either use a binder or the emulsion. That was just kind of a statewide decision for those folks that didn't have a spray paver, that they could still try to bid on the projects. Other than that, that's pretty much all I got.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing the Missouri perspective. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your presentations. Now we have entered the part to where it is that open panel discussion, to where I will go through, and like I said, we've got a fair number of questions, and depending upon the question, some of them are directed specifically to certain agencies, meanwhile others are a little bit more generic that all of you are more than welcome to weigh in on. So one of our first questions is, what is the process for installing / removing tack tank inserts? Can it be done on the fly? So Marvin, I think this one might be geared a little bit more towards you, sir.
Yeah, and I don't believe that would be an on-the-fly type change type operation. It would require some time, and the contractor would have to schedule that to get it swapped.
Are you familiar at all with the Integral DX system? I know they kind of sell themselves as more of a quote unquote on the fly system that you can attach to a traditional paver. Are you familiar with that one at all?
I am not.
Okay.
Hey, Rob, I got a little background with that. I think that's kind of your cat retrofit. So what those guys do is put in a tank and add some spray bars and stuff to a cat paver, and I think it's down up in Minnesota, but I'm not positive. And there's a number of pavers out there now that are those cat retrofits, and I think that's the process you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so as well. We did have one contractor here in Michigan in our Upper Peninsula make the investment in that, and so any of the projects that are up that way, at least 50% of the time, they are using that machine as of right now. I can't say that we've noticed any performance difference between a purpose-built spray paver and one of those add-ons. But we're continuing to track them. All right. Next question. Since the emulsion doesn't have time to break, won't it trap moisture under the asphalt and therefore be concerned about stripping?
You want me to try to tackle that one? I'd be happy to.
Go for it.
Yeah, typically, you're looking at a mix that's already coated with asphalt. And I agree that your question is a good question, because that's one of the first ones we had too, is what about the moisture? Well, it turns out there's really not all that high percentage of moisture there. And when the mix is first placed on it, you're driving, when the mix isn't consolidated and compacted, the moisture can migrate some at that point. But it turns out that at least on the projects I've ever been involved with, there's never been an issue that I've seen that's been created as far as stripping due to the moisture from the emulsion in the process.
We had some issues, we had some issues on that 2014 project that I mentioned that we did on Route 30, and it showed up about 3 months after we placed it, and we had some pretty wild temperature swings, and so traditionally it's pretty cold during the winter months here, but we had some days there where it warmed up to around 70 degrees, and scared quite a few of us because we got some softball to basketball size lumps that started showing up in the pavement all across it, even in the wheel paths. And so we took some cores of it, and one of the amazing things is that in those bubbles, cored right down through them, that emulsion was just spider webbed from the surface all the way to the bottom of that asphalt. So it was still trying to hold on. So we just let it set and the bumps smoothed out and it settled down, and we didn't have any issues out of it after that. So, but that, I don't know if that was a moisture problem per se. It could have been just a temperature shock, but we did experience that.
I think the other thing that could be going on there too, and is possible, you know, you're putting down a heavy application of tack and polymer modified tack, and it's going to create an impermeable barrier right there at the interface with the existing pavement. So any moisture that may try to come up through the existing pavement is going to be probably trapped underneath there, and that's where you could get a blister or something like that. But again, you just have to consider you are putting on something that is going to be, I think, impermeable when you're putting down that rate of application of liquid.
I was gonna say, I don't think we've experienced anything like that here in Michigan to date. But yeah, I mean, something to consider for sure.
I would think if you would consider the road a candidate for a chip seal, for instance, and not be afraid of putting a chip seal on it from a sealing standpoint, you won't have a problem with this then either.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Marvin. Thank you. Next question, can spray pavers be used to pave ramps and tapers? We heard that sometimes they're not the most maneuverable, but looking at some of the pictures that were shared, it does appear that spray pavers can do that. Anybody want to, any particular lessons learned or anything specific to note on that?
I can comment. That was one of the feedback we learned through iterations of developing our spec, which is why we in the spec can find the spray paver to be, like I said, used on travel lanes, turn lanes, auxiliary lanes, and ramps. And we specifically exempted areas such as shoulders, approaches, tapers, or gore areas, because it's difficult to get that machine in some of those areas. Shoulders obviously are less than 10 feet sometimes, and like with a conventional paver, you know, they can't really do gore areas or tapers very well. So it's kind of those same limitations.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to make.
Yeah, we've experienced issues with that as well, and one of the big issues is you know, you already have that heavier layer of emulsion down, and then if you get into a handwork situation, whether it be U-boss or a dense graded pavement, and you try to handwork it at all, kind of starts making a mess out of things, you know. So you're going to get that emulsion mixed up there, and it looks a little bit greasier on the top and flush. But yeah, we've had great luck with, you know, straight line paving and ramps.
Okay, perfect. Next question. Is there any concerns regarding the migration of emulsion into the HMA? Could you please discuss this? I'm assuming this question is referring to that, you know, when we're talking about the spray paver, we're seeing significantly higher shot rates for that emulsion. And I think there may be a little bit of hesitancy on, is that going to start to bleed through or cause us any issues?
I said, in Kansas, we've done a shot rate all the way up to a 0.46. And even on that, which was an 1.5 inch overlay, although the emulsion did migrate up into the mix a little bit, it did not come anywhere close to the surface. So essentially what it did is it kind of created a flexible membrane at the bottom of our mix and helped reduce cracking. So our experience has not been a problem with it, with dense graded mixes anyways, come to the top. Now, on your open graded mixes, your U-BAS or U-BAS, whatever you call it, if you overshoot that stuff comes to the top and creates a challenge. But we haven't had any problem with dense graded mixes.
Very good point. All right. Next question we got, are the rates that are being described the residual rate of the spray rate? I think this is in reference to the specifications that everybody's been showing in the residual asphalt rate of the emulsion.
They are the emulsion rate.
Okay.
So it's gallons per square yard of emulsion.
So are the rates that are being described the residual rate of the spray rate? So hopefully we answered that question appropriately, that we're understanding that question properly for you. Next question, what kinds of surface preparation do you use prior to paving a UBWC? Are we doing any crack sealing, scarification of the existing pavement markings, etc.? So I'll jump in. I know in Michigan, we do recommend, that we see a lot of benefit from doing the pre-treatment of the crack sealing. We usually team that with the project itself. Otherwise, we do have offices that, the year prior, they'll perform the crack seal and then they'll come out and do the paving. But we do see a lot of benefit from that. And then if we have any type of, drawing blank on the name at the moment, pavement markings that are not waterborne, we do also recommend that we strip the long lines and any special markings prior to paving. Do other states follow same cadence?
Yeah, we've done pavement cracking maintenance about a year prior to any kind of an overlay. We have had several projects that primarily just UBOS that we had some debonding issues with some of the striping, and then we've addressed that on future projects. But yeah, we have seen that where especially on the UBOS projects, there's been some debonding on the striping.
Yeah, that's kind of a standard practice for us here in Michigan, that when we're doing a chip seal, a microsurface, or we call it paper place surface seal, ultra thin bonded wearing course, we like to strip those long lines to ensure a good bond. All right, next question. Are there seasonal and or minimal surface air temp requirements that are special to spray paving and UBWCs?
Missouri has a 50 and rising for UBOS.
Yeah. Mike, do you guys have anything special in Kansas?
Actually, Kansas has pretty much the same rules. We have found that the UBAS is so thin that that 50-degree temperature is really, really important to have some heat out there, because it loses temperature so quick and it's hard to get that stuff seated so that it sticks together. So if you get anything below that 50 degrees, you better have your rollers right on that paver's butt to make sure you get that stuff seated right away. Have the vibratory going on the spray paver and everything, because if you don't get that seated, we tend to have some raveling problems on UBAS that we do at the beginning of the season or the end of the season. So I'm a big fan of doing UBAS when it's hot, but when it gets anywhere close to cold, it creates some challenges.
Yeah, those thinner pavements, they're a good tool to have in the toolbox, but yeah, like you stated, either at the beginning of the season or the end of the season, it can be finicky for you, that's for sure. All right, Nathan, this one is directed to you. Can you please explain the 3% increase in cost? During the presentation, you referenced I think it's a quote unquote hidden cost, right? I don't know if you can.
Yeah, we're still internally trying to come up with a better figure for, because we have this in place where the designer is supposed to insert, the spray paver in the contract, and they got to estimate quantities and cost of the contract. And it's currently difficult to do that with bid quantities or historical bid items, and especially because it's hidden in multiple items and spread across multiple items. So I'll be honest, it was given to me by a spray paver manufacturer, so there's not a whole lot of engineering behind it. It was just generally, if you look at, if it was just a mill and fill type of contract, it's around you can estimate around a 3% increase in the contract. So you know, if it's a big project with a bunch of other miscellaneous items in it and stuff, you don't want to just, you know, add 3% to the whole contract. But if it was just a strict mill and fill contract, you know, maybe not including MOT or anything like that, you know, some of those other miscellaneous costs, generally it adds about 3%, is what you can estimate.
Now, do you think that 3% is part of I mean, I know you shared a statistic that by 2022, you had a few more contractors actually having the equipment in the state. Do you think that 3% was there historically because of the lack of contractor community able to perform the work, or is it more material based? Just a gut?
I think there is an increase just because of the cost of the equipment and the extra emulsion, and some of the other what's the right word? Maybe not complications is the right word, but other things involved with the spray paver that do add a little bit of cost. What you ask is a very good question, because now that we're looking at ultra thin bonded wearing course a little closer and maybe getting that back into our paving program, that's all we're wondering. Now that we have contractors with a spray paver, will they be able to bid on those UVWC jobs at a lower price now? Because historically all of those were subcontracted out. And so it's a good question, and it's we won't know until we have the data. So
I understand that one. Absolutely. All right, next question. Is there less bleed through likely with a dense graded mix rather than an open graded mix? I think, Mike, you kind of alluded to that through your shot rate study that you guys did in Kansas. Is that what you found?
Absolutely. Like I said, that shot rate is so important to have that thing dialed in on a UBAS project with the open graded mix, that if you are a little bit low, you could have a bonding issue. You're a little bit high, it comes through the top. With the dense graded mix, we have not seen any problem with that at all. It's have not had any flushing, rutting, nothing like that. When you again shoot up to a 0.46 and you still don't get anything coming through the top, it's a lot more forgiving with your shot rates on the dense graded mix.
All right, Nathan, we got another one for you, sir. What is the learning curve like for the contractors that purchase the spray pavers?
it's pretty steep. And believe me, I'm not an expert on these things, but there is some intricacies that you have to account for, a lot different than a conventional paver. I think, if memory serves, the first couple, at least the first contractor that had the spray paver, I believe they had the equipment manufacturer on site helping them, or maybe even the very first projects where it was subcontracted out, the prime contractor basically had got on the job training watching that subcontractor, because they knew they were eventually going to buy one. And there's other little things as far as in the paving train, you know, how fast you can go, how often you got to nurse that tank, you know, fill that tank up again, little things like that you know, they just learn as their crew gets more familiar with it. But yeah, there is a pretty steep learning curve.
Marvin, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add to that one, coming from a little more experience with it, if there's training that's out there, or is it just practice?
I think, again, the manufacturers are going to be, on site and trying to help the contractor understand. And there are some of the suppliers for liquids and things like that that have familiarity with spray pavers. They can also have some people, field engineers on site to also help.
Excellent. All right. One of our next questions is, what is the purpose of the plate sampling? Is that to ensure that the spray paver is within spec on the application spray rate?
I'm guessing that was to me.
Yeah.
So we take plate samples as part of our quality assurance with any HMA, spray paver or not. That's how we get material from the road, take it back to our labs and test them, and then pay the contractor based on those test results. So we're fully Indiana is QA based. I know some other states are QC based or a mixture of both. But that's how we analyze and pay for the mix. And my point with that was the spray paver does slightly complicate that process. So it's an issue we're still working on.
To go along with that, Nathan, one of the attendees kind of throws out there, has Indiana considered sampling from the trucks rather than the plate sampling?
Yeah, we thought about it. No, we tend to shy away from truck samples for quality assurance. And I know this could sidebar into a whole nother conversation. But we're trying to get the material at the last possible point on the roadway to represent the material on the road. A lot of stuff can happen between the plant and the and the paver. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That's a rabbit hole that I think all of us all too often kind of get stuck down on QA/QC testing. So not a question that I'm seeing yet, but right now the panel is consisting of a lot of state DOTs, and we're looking at highways. I guess the question is, can this type of operation be performed on local routes, surface streets, local streets, lower volume streets? Does anybody have any experience with that?
I don't have any experience with it. I mean, I think it probably goes in line with I think a recent presentation by I forget who put it on. It might have been through FHWA. I mean, they had a series on can you use SMA on local roads, and really what it comes down to is it's kind of a proven technology that will extend the life of your pavement. Specifically talking about dense graded through the spray paver. It's just, do you have those funds that you can commit early on, and then obviously an alternative maintenance operation as far as the UBWC, the thin lay. I mean that's probably just a local decision, if that's an appropriate treatment for the roadway. I guess I'll leave it there and stop rambling.
Maybe a comment here too is it's still a paver,
Right.
and the spray application is another feature of it. So if you can pave on your local road with a standard paver, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it with a spray paver as well.
Yeah, that's where my gut was going. I was trying to get some local agencies to participate with us on the panel. Unfortunately, there were some scheduling conflicts, but I was for the local agencies that are attending and listening. I wanted to try to provide that experience as well, but wasn't able to make it happen. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program with questions. Several Midwestern states have had issues with the top layer of asphalt stripping underneath chip seals. The The spray pavers are using some of the same emulsions as chip seals. Has there been any similar issues under these pavements where asphalt stripping is on the top of the old asphalt accelerated? Where the asphalt stripping is in the top of the old asphalt accelerated.
Marvin, you might have touched on this. It's really just if you have a roadway that is permeable and has moisture in it, you don't want to seal it. It doesn't matter what treatment you're using.
That's exactly right.
So,
and that goes even for the mix itself that you would place on. If you've got a mix underneath that's permeable and you come in with a very dense graded, fine graded material on top of it, yes, you can strip the mix underneath there if there's moisture trying to come out. And the spray paver is going to definitely be capable of putting down enough tack coat to create a impermeable layer there. So yeah, you could, I think I mentioned if you wouldn't feel comfortable putting a chip seal on it, you probably shouldn't do the spray paver on it either.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Again, trying to make this as much of an open discussion as possible in this virtual environment. One of our attendees kind of threw out the comment, why not have projects close to the Indiana border so an Indiana contractor can get it and perhaps Michigan contractors can see what they lost because the paver issue and perhaps get a paver. That's you bring up a very good point. I mean, a lot of times we all like to operate within our own bubbles. Obviously, each state DOT is doing their own thing, let alone even within the DOT, whether you're broken off into districts or regions or what have you. Trying to coordinate those things across boundaries can be tricky, but I can always give Nathan a call, and I know we do a fair amount of work down there by the Indiana border. I'll give him a call and let him know what we're up to. So I appreciate the comment. Let's see here. Mitch, any prep on the concrete surface before applying the emulsion with the spray paver?
Other than we swept it. We did do some crack sealing on that prior to the overlay, but outside of that, we did no micro milling or anything like that as far as prepping anything.
Now, I've heard that, so Missouri does a lot of it on concrete. Mike, in Kansas, you said you guys do any of your paving on concrete, you use a spray paver, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. We here in Michigan, we had a project on concrete. I'm not entirely sure what happened to it, but we ended up milling it off within like a year or two. Some folks were commenting that it started to fall apart. Not entirely sure. I did do an experimental project on concrete again here in Michigan. And I knew it was going to be the ultimate stress test, right? The concrete below was in really poor shape. We had spent maybe about $500,000 on some concrete patches prior, but still was not addressing all of the distress that was present prior to it going down. So I mean, it was a little bit of a Hail Mary. We figured that best case, we're going to get a better driving surface at least for a couple of years, right? And I mean, I'm happy to report that 3 years later, that ultra thin bonded wearing course is still providing a much better driving surface than what the existing concrete was. So I think our hesitation on putting it on concrete, I'm hoping to lessen that a little bit here in Michigan, and then hearing your guys' experiences. I mean, that's something to definitely take back and see if we can't put that in our toolbox for our concrete pavements. Another question that we got up on the board. In Missouri, what performance grade binder is allowed as an alternative? How many projects have been paved this way?
In concern with dense graded mixes or the U-Boss type mixes?
It does not specify, so let's go dense graded.
We spec out 7022 for our U-Boss, but it depends on the roadway and our ADT levels. So, I mean, we could step up to even a 125 SMA if it was on an interstate. But yeah, it just depends on the type of road. So we use 76 minus 22, 70, 22, and 64, 22, unless you're modifying the binder. We also use B grades as well too.
Thank you. Next question, has anyone evaluated changes to their dense graded HMA designs specific to spray paver use? It looks like the answer to that one is no.
It doesn't affect the mix design. It's all we're doing is saying spray more tack down. So
Yeah.
We didn't change ours, but we did see increased densities from using a spray paver. So I would say probably on average about a % increase in density. It's pretty fair to say.
Yeah, the use of a spray paver with dense graded mix is one of the next things that Michigan we're hoping to try to get a test section in, see how it performs. Our paving industry tends to be very strong in the state, so trying to collaborate, work with, to try to meet everybody's needs is the goal here. So. Unfortunately, don't have a whole lot to add to that conversation, but very intrigued and excited for an opportunity to put it down here.
A couple of our projects, we also saw a nice increase in unconfined joint densities. So that was a big plus right there, because we have a pretty aggressive unconfined joint density spec, but it did seem to make that a lot easier for contractors to achieve. And so that was nice to see. You're essentially locking that pavement down, and your compactive effort is all getting concentrated. Whereas, sometimes you can see on those unconfined joints where your edge line kind of walks a little bit from your compaction effort. You really don't see that that much when you're using a spray paver with that emulsion underneath them.
Oh, that's great information to have. All right, nearing the end here with questions at the moment. Is there rut and ride data for projects in Kansas which compares the performance of each of the segments which had varying application of emulsions, or was the mileage?
There's definitely rutting data. I mean, when KDOT goes out and does their crack surveys, they actually take a straight edge out there and check rutting, and there's almost no difference in rutting in any of the sections. The ride data, I'm not sure that I've seen that. We have a van that drives everything every year and may be able to tie that down, but when I drive it, you can't tell the difference. So I don't know the fact that the different shot rates in the different test sections affected the ride at all. But and from a rutting standpoint, there's pretty much no difference between the different shot rates.
Perfect. Are there any geometric limitations to using the spray paver with thick emulsion, steep grades, cross slope, super elevation?
We haven't seen that as an issue.
Okay. Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the emulsion is relatively thick. I mean, that emulsion membrane, to where, I mean, the viscosity of it still needs to come through the nozzles, but yet it's not completely running off the pavement. So,
Plus, you're covering it with hot mix so quickly, it doesn't really have much chance to move. You got less chance with a spray paver than you do with a regular distributor, where you have some, elevation.
that's a perfect point, Marvin. Thank you. Let's see here. After paving the main line with the spray paver, what methods are you using to avoid tracking onto main line from the shoulder paving operation? So I think Nathan, this one's geared towards you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm trying to, it's the our normal practices for avoiding tracking. I guess it's the way our spec is written is we're saying, hey, we're going to make sure this main line has 0 chance for tracking, and then do our normal practices on the shoulder, which is pre-tacking with the distributor truck. I guess maybe I'm not understanding the question completely, or hopefully I answered that.
Yeah, I think the question was more concerned with, I mean, if we're trying to eliminate tracking the track,
Mhm.
was there anything special or specific that you guys performed to try to reduce or eliminate that?
So we're
Not
not doing
specific to spray pavers, so we just have our
doing anything
spec and
different in
update.
sorry, Nathan, we're not doing anything different in Kansas, and frequently you'll spray pave the main line and then you'll get some tracking from the tack on the shoulders getting dragged out there. That's just a common practice.
Okay. All right, Marvin, this one might be towards you. How do you check the calibration of the spray paver tack distribution system? How often should it be checked?
Well, typically, I think those rates are fairly consistent. I mean, as long as the nozzles are spraying the way they should be, and you can calibrate it just like you do a distributor. You just have to go to a location where you can have a test pad down or multiple test pads, and then drive the paver over it at the normal paving speed and engage the spray bar, spray over the pads, weigh them up, and check against what your target rate was. And I'll throw that back to Mike. Yeah, are you guys in Kansas doing anything to check that on any frequency?
Yeah, actually, KDOT has a rule that you got to check at least twice a day. So
There you go.
every paver's got a computer on it that tells you how many gallons are still in there, and you keep track of that. And then you obviously know how many stations you paved, and you know how wide your pavement is, and you can use their number of gallons based off of that and determine if they're getting close to the number you're looking for. It's truthfully, it's been pretty darn amazing how close they get to what they're shooting for.
And that answers the next question on how is the emulsion rate verified on the pavement. And it sounds like there are testing procedures that are out there. You guys can go look up Kansas DOT's specifications on their testing. So slowly getting here closer to the end. Has paving UBWC or dense graded tight to curbs been a challenge?
I'm not aware of it being more difficult than with the conventional paver or anything like that.
Because it's the same screed, right?
Yeah, it's still a paver.
Yeah.
That was tight to curbs, if I heard correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't had any issues with that.
I'll take that one step further. With the open graded, is there any concerns? If so, we're usually talking what, 90 pounds a square yard, right? 90 pounds. So instead of having it above your gutter line, there's some people that may be inclined to try to mill so it's still level. Would you want to mill that open graded mix next to it?
We try to avoid anything like that, to where you're sealing that edge up on a U-boss pavement. Essentially, the design is to let that water kind of drain out of it. So we try to keep that to a minimum.
And we do similar in Kansas. The goal is get water out of that pavement. You got to think about your shoulders too. When you bash your main line, you don't want to have a dense graded mix on the outside on your shoulders, because that would trap water as well. So when you're doing your UBAS or UBOS, you want to make sure that that water has a place to get out, especially in places where it's going to freeze. That water sitting down there and freezing is going to cause some challenges later.
That's, I mean, that's the direction that I kind of provide in Michigan as well. That I know the tendency is to want to mill to have it nice and flush, but when it's open graded like that, you need to let that water out. So let it overhang your curb line just a little bit.
Usually on interstates, we try to hang it out there over onto the shoulder a little bit, so it's not right there on the striping anyway. And so you have that edge of, the pavement where it can wick out there onto the shoulder. And essentially you're only looking at, maybe an inch at best of a drop off.
Correct. Yeah. The 90 pounds is what we shoot for. So that gets you around that 3/4 of an inch here in Michigan. Can the spray bar be observed all the way across the lane to tell that all nozzles are working properly? After inspection, are inspectors satisfied that uniform application is being achieved?
Actually, I've done that I've done that a number of times. If you sit in the ditch and look across the spray bar and look for a shininess across the pavement, you can tell all the nozzles are working. And if you see a dull mark out somewhere in the middle of that usually means there's a nozzle clogged. You tell the contractor, and they've got ways of getting them unclogged. Different pavers, when you look at the CAT retrofit, it's got its spray bars in different locations, and most of them are visible without being blocked. And then you got to look at those spray bars behind the tracks to make sure that everything's getting covered. But it is doable. It takes a little effort, but you can definitely see when a nozzle gets clogged and talk to the contractor about getting it corrected.
One of our best paving practices is that we typically like to see like an inch and a half at least sticking out from underneath that mat to make sure that the coverage is uniform and we're getting it from edge to edge. So that's one thing we kind of do as a help with that, so you can see that coverage.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense right there for sure. We do have we have some contractors in the crowd today, and they had commented that they've got a lot of experience helping locals and in low volume roads pave with a spray paver. I believe they're in New York State and helping out Onondaga County and a couple others. Another one, some more local, I brought up the local agencies. So it looks like in Hepburn County in Minnesota, they've done several ultra thin bonded wearing course projects on their system. We've also placed an ultra thin bonded wearing course over some concrete that needed a short-term fix as well. Speakers for Indiana, looks like Nathan, they're still coming, still got some for you. If you are not paving the shoulders on the main line, are you milling in to match joint or leaving a lip behind?
So, what am I not understanding here? So we would usually mill the entire pavement, and then we're just saying the main line is paved with the spray paver, the shoulder is paved conventional or with a widener or whatever. Are we talking like where the joints are, or?
So if I had to guess, as a lot of us are dealing with really tight budgets, Sometimes the practice is, hey, we're going to let the shoulders be.
Okay.
So, if you are not paving the shoulders on the.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure we've run across that situation. For the basis for use where we're targeting those larger jobs, those high profile jobs, I think we would typically be addressing the shoulders at the same time. So it's a good question. Guess I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. And all right, last question on the board is, has anyone done follow-up treatments to ultra-thin bonded wearing course? I think, Mike, you alluded to that in your presentation, right? That if you're paving over an existing one, that you up your shot rate.
That's correct. I mean, you obviously have a lot of surface voids there. So when we go over a UBAS or ultra thin, that we use a spray paver and we actually shoot a 0.3 gallons per square yard so we can fill a lot of those voids. So your tack isn't just going down and sticking to nothing, that you are filling up those voids and kind of creating a little, how to say it, a RCI type product that has some flexibility that reduces some reflective cracking. And it also creates the good bond with the dense graded mix going over the top of it. Actually, I think KDOT's actually done some UBAS over UBAS, which is a challenge. And we've had fairly decent success with that, but getting that shot rate right is even more challenging just because there's a lot of variables there that affect how well that UBAS is going to stick, and you can't have too much or else it'll come to the top. So our normal practice is to put dense graded mix over a UBAS and use a spray paver with a 0.3 gallons per square yard shot rate.
Yeah, in Michigan, on our lower volume the applications, we've had success with placing a double chip over top of them. We actually have another one of those, I think, slated for construction either this year or next. So I'm interested on keeping a track on that one and seeing how that performs. So, all right, we are reaching the end. I want to thank everybody on the Eastern Standard Time. I know we've eaten into your lunchtime, but I appreciate all of you who have stuck around. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists today. Your wealth of knowledge and sharing your experiences with your respective agencies has been great. I appreciate everybody walking through all of the questions that were given, and everybody who's in attendance. Thank you for your questions. I hope all of you had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about spray paving in the different ways that it can be used, whether it's an open graded mix or a dense graded mix, and look to try to find a way to put it into your preservation arsenal. A lot of you have been staring at the agenda. At the bottom of that agenda was my contact information. So if you had any additional follow-up questions, or if you have topics or would like to be a presenter in the future, please reach out to me, drop me an email, give me a call. I enjoy talking about this stuff, whether it's ultra thin bonded wearing course or anything that deals with pavement preservation. That's a passion of mine, and it's in the National Center. Take another hard look at them. Try to get involved. We do have our national conference coming up in September. Todd, please correct me if I'm wrong. In Indianapolis, Indiana. So if you get a chance, try to join us in Indy. Look forward to having you there. So with that, I want to thank everyone again and hope to see you next quarter. Todd, are we no longer live?
Hang on a second. Yes, we are. Patty, are you still on?
I am. I
How
think
do
we
we-
just would have to kick everybody else off.
Okay. So there's no way to stop the broadcast?